everybody. This is Calloway Cieslak. Calloway and I went to school together. Were we in like, I think like, did we do like, we had the same.
We had the same voice teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dr. Marcus.
Yeah, that's right. Did we have theory together, or
we probably did?
Yeah, we were definitely connected via Marcus either way.
Yes, I thought for some reason like we also may have done some sort of choral something with each other, but
I'm sure we did at some point. I was in the choirs as much as they would let me. So.
Right. Did you do chambers or anything, or is that
I did do chambers. Oh okay. Yeah.
So we were in chambers together. Yeah. Look at that. I have good memory.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that was like how many years ago? I graduated from Loyola like 7 years ago. That feels like I feel old.
Wild, right?
Not older. I'm not gonna say I'm old because I'm older.
Yeah, it would have been like 6 or 7 years ago. I think that we were singing together. So.
Yeah. Well, here we are again, podcasting, which just taking all of the different outlets of conversation and exploring music, because you don't just explore it through making music, you explore it by talking about it as well.
Absolutely.
So, this episode is going to be like very musically engaging for all of my music friends out there. And there's plenty of them, a lot of people that appreciate music in the ways in which that I feel like a lot of us appreciate music. I, for sure, appreciate all different types of music, different genres. And even this week, I've been on my socials for the Self-Aware Millennial and just been asking people about different things about like their tastes in music, because I want to get a better idea of like what people like and what they don't like. All to prepare for this episode. So I've already given the description outline of who you are, but would you like to add any flair for the audience about yourself as well?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Calloway Cieslak. I'm a conductor and composer. I'm right now studying over at the University of North Texas, trying to get a degree under my belt, and hopefully going to be breaking into the professional world soon. And a big thing for me is that for the longest time, I ran the New Orleans Volunteer Orchestra for like 6 years in New Orleans, as well as the Voices of New Orleans Choir. And these were community groups that I co-founded and co-directed for quite some time. And within that context, I really started to learn about what music can mean to people and how much it can really be impactful on their lives. And ever kind of since then, it's been a real mission of mine to be more engaged with like accessibility and outreach. And as of late, also like racial equity in programming, and so really thinking about what this musical experience of like Writ music and classical music can be, and how it can actually be really wonderful, engaging to more people, because I love this stuff and I met a lot of people who loved it and it brought value to their lives. And I want to try to get it so that other people can experience that in the same way, and not have quite so many barriers standing in the way of just appreciating Jupiter the way that I do.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that insight. Just because I know and then we'll be talking about this a little bit more, but I feel like even on our ends as musicians, as whatever you want to call us, like most of us don't always necessarily call ourselves musicians. Like we're all kinds of stuff, but I do find that it's just so much harder to identify with how can I put this in the best words? How to identify with the culture of music that I should say our basics were given to us. I don't know if this makes any sense. Like, I'm really trying to get...
No, I think you're touching on something that I've been thinking about a lot too, is that there's kind of a disconnect between the music that we grew up listening to and the music that we studied. I think for many of us, I mean, not all of us, definitely, like some of us did just grow up in a symphonic music family or something like that, right? Like some of us, like that was what we grew up listening to. That's not me. And that's not the experience of frankly, a lot of the music students that I ran into, even in kind of the conservatory setting. It might be true of Carlos Miguel Prieto, and great, good for him. That's wonderful. But like, it wasn't true for me or most of my music ed colleagues. We grew up listening to hip hop, to classic rock. I grew up listening to like Coldplay was a big band for me growing up.
Yes, I loved Coldplay.
You remember Rush of Blood to the Head? That was the album I had like in my car all the time.
Yes, that was like the soundtrack to my Katrina years. Like
Yeah.
right during Katrina, like I listened to Coldplay to like get me by that entire time. Like
I'm just curious, did In My Place stand out to you as like a standout track for that album?
Well, see, that was their first album. I was more interested in X and Y. I think that was their next album.
Okay,
but I listened to some of their stuff during the Rush of Blood situation. I think I really liked the Yellow song. Wearing yellow, by the way, if you're on YouTube.
Yeah.
But no, Coldplay 100%. Like,
right. I loved it, you know, but you know, I just grew up and there was just other band. I wasn't listening to classical music. I was studying classical piano. I mean, I was playing Beethoven and Chopin and all this stuff. It wasn't what I listened to in my spare time. Like, what is that? I feel like we need to take a look at that. What does that say that like we can't even get the people who are actively kind of studying this stuff to engage with it until they're, you know, 20 something years old? I feel like we're probably doing something wrong there. So yeah. I don't know.
I mean, if anything, I think we like to try to compare what we are now listening to and what we like actually listen to on a daily versus like what we are being taught or like practicing. Like, I feel like we try to compare those two, but I personally, it's just so hard for me to compare them.
Yeah.
In a way that says, okay, so this directly correlates to something I've been learning in my theory class or something, right. You know, like it just doesn't match.
And they can really, but I think that there's not been any efforts to like there hasn't been enough efforts to actually do those things. I think that it's just been taught kind of in isolation without trying to draw the parallels that are there, that are actually kind of interesting, that could actually point out like, you know, what we're talking about here in music class is actually, you know, like Taylor Swift is also doing this in like kind of a different conceptual way or whatever, you know, like that's things that could be done more, but I feel haven't been done and leave that huge wide gap for us between what we think of as popular music and what we think of as art music.
Right. And on that note, I just wanted to let the audience know, my listeners, I want y'all to know that because we are trying to get more into at least for the Self-Aware Millennial, we're trying to hone into those uncomfortable conversations and what makes people tick. The reason why I wanted Calloway to come on to this podcast is so that we can kind of dive into more of the reasons why, at least within the art elite music world, is there a word for it? I don't know, but I
conservatory, I guess.
Yeah, a conservatory of people that will probably be listening to this episode at this point. I want to dive into why it's so uncomfortable, at least for that group of people, to accept other forms of music as equal and not necessarily as lower than. And I know I've had my own experiences while I was at my school or at our school during just, you know, wanting to sing different ways, but not being told that I was singing incorrectly because of the way I was like phonating my voice. But we'll get into that. Let's get into our first segment, which I had not been doing for a while, but if you've been listening to the podcast for pretty much since the beginning, you know about ponytails. But if you don't know about ponytails is with tails spelled TALES. It's a segment where I ask my guests to tell a tale with a ponytail in their head, and I give the name of the topic, and then we both share our ponytail. If you got a ponytail suggestion or a tale you'd like to share, you can email me at theselfawaremillennial@gmail.com. Now, by the way, I have another segment after this, but I wanted to do the next segment before. Anyway, yeah, let's talk about ponytails and then I'll go into our next segment because I'm really excited about our second segment, but let's stick to the outline. Yeah. So let's tell a tale about a time where we felt reprimanded by another musician. It could be a teacher or a student or acquaintance or whoever for expressing interest in any style of music that wasn't related to classical music. I'll go first just because I was just kind of talking about this before we started this segment. And only because it's like really prevalent in my head, and it has everything to do with something that actually happened in one of my master classes with Dr. Marcus back when I was at Loyola. I think I was singing, I forget what song I was singing, but it was definitely not one of those like classical songs. It was a song where I basically had to belt. It was like a musical theater piece.
Sure, something like in a Gershwin vein of things.
Not even Gershwin.
Okay.
Like something even like not Gershwin. No.
Okay.
Because Gershwin, even with Gershwin, you're allowed to, or I find with Gershwin, I hear a lot of people, you can sing classically
yeah,
with Gershwin and be fine, but like no, this type of song I was singing, like I had to go full voice. I had to belt like I normally do in like my church, when I belt at my church, and when I belt like in all these other places except when I'm at Loyola, because belting it's unhealthy, and belting will hurt your voice, and you know you'll get nodes and da 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 da. Like I hear all these different things, but anyway, all I can remember was like I sang the song. And like, I remember, I forget who was in the class at that point. I don't even know if you were there at that point, but I just remember like, I remember Dr. Marcus like not liking it. It was like the angriest I saw him ever be like with me, because she was just like, this is not how you're supposed to sing. This is not. And like, I'm probably like, I think I was a senior or like a junior or senior at this point. So like, I knew the risk I was taking by singing this song, but I was like, I'm gonna do it anyway. And I just remember just feeling this extremely like this anger, like I mean I understood where it was coming from and understood why the anger was there, but it's interesting, what one person finds as unhealthy, another person finds as, you know, you're just fine, because it depends on, at least when it comes to belting, it has everything to do with the placement of you know, your breathing technique. And I have honestly, like, I knew how to belt before I knew how to like sing,
right?
With my my two different voices, like my opera voice, like I like to say, and then like my belting voice, like those are the two I normally, and then there's a way to mix them together.
You can do both healthily, and you can do both well.
Yes. And both have to be exercised. I've noticed even while I was at Loyola, I was singing more operatically a lot more than I was like belting. So it was harder for me to belt sometimes than it was for me. Like I couldn't necessarily always do both, or I had to find ways of exercising the two so that I could still do both just as well. It was very interesting. But the main thing was that I was singing a lot, and I just my voice needed a break.
I'm really glad you brought that up too, because I feel like particularly like in the field of kind of conservatory training for singing, you see a lot of very like prescriptivist kind of things about singing, like hiding behind what healthy singing is. And like, there's a lot of healthy singing out there, to be honest, but you'll get a lot of teachers that kind of say the only healthy singing actually is operatic full vibrato. And I mean, I've seen that particularly in terms of opera singers, like being kind of looking down at, weirdly enough, choral singing, where it's just like, oh, that's not healthy singing. And it's just like, all right, listen, just because you can't do it for 4 hours straight, like, does not mean that it's, that's not the same thing as like just ripping at your vocal cords. And like, if you can belt, for an hour without tearing yourself, like really exhausting yourself, that doesn't mean that you've done irreparable damage to your vocal cords. Maybe it's not, as healthy or something as the thing that you can do for 4 hours with full, whatever, fine. But like, it's just, I think a lot of it is kind of hiding behind that idea that like, this is somehow objectively like better for your body and the body's natural way of singing. And it's like, it's like
exercise. You have to exercise anything that you want to do well. That's what I've noticed, at least on my end, when I'm singing in different forms. Like if I have been saying a certain way for a while, I'm gonna feel it. It feels like I hadn't been exercising it, and I have to just work back up to that,
Right. And maybe opera singing is one of those things where you can train your voice to do like a marathon, a super impressive thing.
Yes.
But that doesn't invalidate sprinting.
Yes.
That doesn't invalidate swimming, just like other ways of singing. Like I think it's just used a little bit too much as this kind of catch-all defense of like, this is how it should be.
Yes.
Oof.
And I think, and this might be just my own opinion, this is why I'm letting everybody know, this might be my opinion. I find that belting in general is something that they usually leave up to people of color. In terms of like singing. I mean, we hear it. There's some artists out there, but I feel like the first artists that are like, I guess, well known for the ways in which they are allowed or able to belt in healthy ways, I guess, have been left up to people of color. And because people that aren't people of color aren't necessarily used to it, and they can't do it, and they tried, and they're like, oh, it's hurting my voice. They're like, oh, this must not be healthy. So whatever they're doing, that's not healthy. I think that's literally what happened.
They must be doing it wrong.
I really think that's what, and we're going to talk about this kind of going into our main topic. But yeah, that was my ponytail, by the way. Sorry. And let's talk about your ponytail.
Yes. All right. So this is, no, you're good. I'm going to be, instead of a ponytail, I'll be a unicorn.
In my head.
Is my...
Thank you for doing the unicorn thing. I completely forgot I had a whole ponytail holder.
You can do a ponytail while I'm telling mine.
Yeah, I will.
So mine is actually fairly recent. I had a moment recently with I don't want to drag anybody's name through the mud, but I think that this is whatever. This is we had a composer come in for a Zoom meeting recently for this online class. It was actually for orchestra, but whatever. It was Samuel Adler. He wrote a famous orchestration book. And I've used it. It's a really great orchestration book, actually. And I remember one of the students asked a question about what kind of classical, non-symphonic, whatever music did he listen to? And there was just kind of a moment where he mentioned he doesn't really listen to pop music for inspiration for his music. And it came off very I don't really use that kind of music to help me with real music. That's kind of the way that it came off. And it was a real bummer because it's and I get if you're not into kind of the pop music scene, a lot of that stuff, if you're into classical music, the kind of engagement that people get out of pop music might not work for you. Not everybody has to be into EDM. Not everybody has to be into Taylor Swift, whatever, nobody has to like Nicki Minaj, but it's just you're just writing off so much music there. There's so much amazing stuff out there, especially for me at least, in the funk scene, oh my God, there's so much cool stuff to look at that feels extraordinarily relevant to eclectic modern composition styles. That's playing with really, really cool bits of just, groove and rhythmic displacement. And that, what are you talking about? That can absolutely be relevant. And some modern composers are even doing that, Missy Mazzoli and Carolyn Shaw, a bunch of these other people are looking at Nakathula was another one of those. I think I'm saying her name wrong, but a lot of these modern composers are absolutely looking at this and being able to pull out idioms from popular music and reimagine them in a symphonic space in really cool and interesting ways. And it was just a real bummer to hear a kind of a respected composer and author not see that and just be so dismissive of a huge swath of music.
Yeah. I love that your cat is agreeing with you, by the way. No, but you're completely right. I find it, and you think about it, even the composers that we now consider to be a little bit more outdated, that people of the elite in the music world, I should say, or of that specific world. I mean, when we study these composers, I just say Beethoven right now because people were like, oh, Beethoven was so revolutionary in his time and da 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 da. I mean, you got to think about it, music evolves. Hey, what was I going to say? Yeah. So
Music evolves, you were saying.
Yeah, music evolves, and at his time, like, people didn't think like what he was doing was, you know, it was like dangerous, like the ways in which like he was like creating some of his stuff, and you know, they had never heard stuff like that before. And so like even at that time he may not have been popular, but he was more popular by the time, you know, he
right
he ducked out of here. And yeah, basically.
Peace.
But yeah, he peaced out. And I find it, I just find, you know, like it may also be where like even right now, like, yeah, we do. I think we appreciate music more now because it's just so much more of it that is accessible to us than it was like way back when. It's easier for us to like just like go online and just discover all these different forms, variations of music. Like there's just so much out there.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I find that in his situation, it is kind of unfortunate that he wasn't able to, I guess, appreciate what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's just that they may just never even had the slightest of interest of discovering new music, or
maybe. And some of it's, and again, a lot of it can be just valid things about taste. Like, you know, I don't like metal music. Like, I think I think it's great. Like, obviously it's very, you know, people who play that have extraordinary technical proficiency, and the singing technique is wild. Oh my God. Like, to be able to scream healthily. Like, I've seen just occasional videos of somebody being able to like switch from growling to singing to screaming, and
yes,
like, and you're just like, my God, but it doesn't appeal to me. Like, it just doesn't. But I can say that without saying like this is a garbage art form, like, and not really worth drawing anything from. I can just say it doesn't really appeal to me, and that's why I'm not drawing from it. Like, yeah. But I think that he presented it, at least in that moment, much more like, well, I don't draw on pop music for serious art. And it's like, dude, oof. You're talking to students, and I think you should be a little bit more, should not be quite so dismissive of an entire genre of music. Yeah. And I also find that even in that situation, it's kind of like you could still like not appreciate, or something can't appeal. Things cannot appeal to, and you could still find something in there to say, well, you know, like, I think it's amazing that, like you said, like people can growl and then sing, and, you know, be able to carry on like a full concert and not like, you know, catch da, you know, like there's usually something you can offer that is positive about something, even if it doesn't appeal to you. Even if it doesn't appeal to you, understanding why it appeals to people is actually a pretty rewarding experience in my experience. Yeah. Well, on that note, this is perfect. We can go into the next segment, which is Stay Aware, which is I finally got a title for this, everybody, because I think I was calling it Self-Aware in the News at one point, but I'm just going to call it Stay Aware. This is a pop culture segment where we discuss current events. And obviously we are talking about pop culture and this pop music. And I really want to know your thoughts on the latest Lil Nas video. I love the Lil Nas video. I think it's great. It's really funny, actually. My partner Journey, I think you might actually know them, but they wrote up a little like Tumblr post that was just like kind of delving deep into this. Yeah. I gotta get back on Tumblr. That makes me excited. Yeah, no, I gotta check that out. Yeah, no, I'll try to see if I can dig it up. But it was, you know, it's a artfully crafted music video. It's got symbolism, it's got satire, it has commentary, and it's a really good, I think, example of what hip hop and rap can do well, which is, you know, really, really sharp commentary on social events. You know, like I remember listening to Kendrick Lamar Damn and like realizing myself like, God, this is something that rap can do extraordinarily well that I don't think that, you know, a symphony ever really could. Like, somebody can do a bunch of other great things, but like this particular thing, it's doing really well. And this experience is dependent on like is really tied to this particular genre and art form, it's so well done. And I also just realized that I think I can maybe put the Diaz Irae chant over the Lil Nas X over Montero, the song. So
I'm gosh. Oh, if you end up doing that, please, I would love to like post it on the page so that everybody can hear. Sweet. No, I enjoyed it as well, and I don't know if it's more along the lines. I think everybody obviously is talking about more the visual aspects of the video right now versus the lyrics, which I haven't honestly done very much analysis on the lyrics as of now because like I'm still enamored by what I've seen visually. But I think that Lil Nas did a very great job of pissing people off, the people that there's just so much symbolism in there.
It is.
And I hope that, oh, and by the way, the day that we are recording this episode is his birthday.
So, is it really?
Yeah, and he said
happy birthday, Lil Nas.
He said at 3 p.m. he wants everybody to turn on 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to turn on Montero and go out in the street and twerk. He wants like everybody to do that in honor of his birthday. So
I'll have to learn how to twerk in the next couple hours.
I mean, if anything, just go out there, blast Montero, and just, you know.
I can do that.
You don't have to. I mean, I may not be twerking, but I'm gonna be doing some.
This is making me think it'd be so funny to take Montero and like try to Gregorian chantify it just to like add to the satire of all this.
Yes, I would love that. Like, oh gosh, oh my goodness, I love it. Okay, well, let's get into our main topic while we still have you. This is kind of going along the lines of everything we've already been talking about, but I kind of just want to give a little background before we actually get into it. So, as y'all know, classical music, from my perspective, was always seen as the elite genre of all other music forms. That's just how it was presented to me, not just by, I mean, we like to say like it's just white people, but it's like, it's everybody that's within that field. Like I've seen my own people, Black people, like people of all different races that kind of have like just, you know, I'm better than you because I can read music, because I know musical theory, da 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 da. But I also find that, you know, like not just in like music, but like it's the same as like how ballet is seen as the foundation for dance.
Yeah. And
all other forms of dance are not nearly as great as ballet. Anyway,
that's something for me. It was just like when I was really trying to think about how to like I was even before I was really focused in on trying to think about being more like racially equitable in this whole kind of world of Writ music. I was really thinking about the class part of it, the elitism part of it. And of course those things are wrapped up, but it's almost like the classism is even bigger than that, where it's like you can still have that respectability politics play out, where it's like you have people of color and Black, brown populations like get to that place, and it's still kind of like playing that game of this is classism and this is elitism, and you know, here we are at like the top of the art, the pinnacle of artistic achievement, which just happens to be predominantly European. Who would have thought? You know,
right? So just so everybody's aware, Calloway came to me several months ago asking my opinion on renaming classical music, because the current title has strong European, Eurocentric, and classic connotations. And the new name that he proposed, I'm sorry, are your pronouns he?
Yes,
him?
yeah.
Okay, sweet, yeah. Sorry. Okay, the new name he proposed was Writ music, which seeks to centralize music technology or notation that is significant to the tradition of music and decentralizes whiteness and the superiority complex of it all. So I've kind of just laid out some topics to discuss and consider, but I want to preface all this by saying that there was a wonderful video, if most of my musician friends might already have seen it, by what's his face?
Adam Neely,
called Music Theory and White Supremacy. I think at first he called it music theory is racist, but then he changed the title because it just got people on edge, like it was clickbait or whatever. But like when you actually listen or like, watch the video, like you were just like,
yeah,
yes, just dropping all kinds of gems. So I'm going to leave that resource in the show notes for everybody so y'all can check it out. But that was just a beautifully done video. So we're kind of going to couple that and like talk about our own experiences. And we're just going to talk about that right now.
Yeah. Can I expand on the Writ music thing real quick?
Absolutely. Yes.
So
Go ahead.
to kind of like define that as best I can. So like the kind of tradition of music that we often refer to as classical music, like has at different times had a different kind of relationship with notation, but it's always been like a really, really important part of it. Yeah. And it's not the only music tradition to do that. And that's a big kind of caveat to all this is like, it's not the only one that uses notation as like this really central thing, but it does have a really, especially kind of in its current form, it has a very, very strong tie to it. And like the word writ, like literally is kind of this legal term where it's like a written order. And that almost kind of describes some of the relationship that we have with notation, where it's like, if I handed you a composition that I wrote, like you're not allowed, like I mean that in kind of social conventions and cultural conventions, like you wouldn't just get to change pitches, right? Like there's a lot of things that are just like there is this relationship built in where a composer writes instructions and the performer performs it.
Correct.
And like that is, and it's also really interesting to think about that in terms of like what is it like if a composer writes something for a symphony and a symphony performs it, any symphony can perform that, and if they do it to the ink, that's a performance. Whereas like that's very, very different, for example, than a lot of other genres where it's like if anybody else does Montero, that's a cover, that's not a performance, right? Like we think of those very differently. So like it's just this idea of trying to centralize this. There are certainly stylistic elements that play into whether or not we consider something writ music or not, or classical music, whatever, but like most of it I think a lot more of it has to do with just that kind of musicking, that kind of model for music making. So
yeah, thanks for describing that, because I mean I know when you first like brought it up I was like, I don't know what this is, but I'm here for it. And no, I think that's really interesting what you just said about how like we consider like more classical music anybody that performs it outside of the originator of the whoever wrote it, we consider it as a performance, but versus like someone else that's been doing more modern music and somebody else does it, we call it a cover.
Right. And that can be really powerful too, in the sense that like anybody can, with the right training and with the right kind of proficiency, like anybody can give a performance, like a authentic performance. And that's really what we mean when you say performance, like an authentic realization of the work, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can give an authentic performance of Beethoven if they have the right training, and same as they can for Samuel Coleridge Taylor or William Grant Still or Florence Price or Chopin or whoever.
Yeah.
If they can hack it, if they can play it, like that's going to be an authentic performance, and that is really powerful. Like I think there are lots of things that are intrinsically European about the art form, but there are things that are not, and there are things that are like also intrinsically multicultural, like from the start of it. And if we can focus more on the universality of that model, then I think that we can have something a lot less Eurocentric and something a lot more beautiful, and something that we can celebrate without having to celebrate just the kind of white supremacy of it all.
Right. Speaking of white supremacy of it all, let's talk a little bit about the music theory knowledge related to class structure and the ability to afford to learn classical music. Yeah. So let's kind of go into that a little bit. Funny thing enough, like I know I took like 4 years worth of like music theory, and unfortunately I don't know if I remember much of it. It might just be the singer in me that doesn't need to know nearly as much. But yeah, I do think that there is a classism to even getting a chance to learn music theory, as I was saying earlier in this podcast. And also, I'm very blessed to have had a family that could barely afford for me to learn it.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Like lessons are really what you need to be able to hack it in kind of the conservatory situation. Yeah. Most people, I don't know a whole lot of colleagues that were able to get to a music college without taking lessons. Yeah. And, that's not even to say, and that's a huge expense. And like, that's not even to cover the fact that like, they might not be, in a music education setting, like in a school or something, like in a music program. One, that's not enough. That's not enough usually to get them where they need to go if they want to really pursue music professionally. But two, that in and of itself is a big expense. That's still going to be, they're going to need to at least spend money on instruments. Choir's a little bit more accessible. It's different for everything, but like, it's still like, that's a big thing, and finance is going to play a huge part about how much they succeed. For me too, like I didn't really have, we had a music program at my school, but I was at a small parochial school. I didn't get that much out of it, like, because I didn't have like a big music program to thrive in. Yeah. The only reason I got into music college was because I was taking lessons, and that's what it comes down to. There is fortunately, some work trying to be done to make some of that more affordable and accessible to particularly lower income neighborhoods and lower income, like just lower socioeconomic regions of the country. But it's not enough. It's got to be like bigger systemic kind of fixes to that, and to try to make some of that, if somebody is interested in this, that they have the ability to really pursue it.
Yeah. There's one thing I've noticed as I've worked with musicians just within the city of New Orleans, which there are a very vast array of different musicians with different backgrounds that play just as good on top of each other, that you would never know. Some of them cannot read music, some of them can, and just like they took all the courses, they did all the lessons, and some didn't. They just kind of learned on their own. And like I know so many great musicians from both spectrums, and I like seeing them come together to try to create something and like play something that the audience obviously is never going to know, that like, that they don't care what their backgrounds are. They just care they can play, or that, they're in tune with each other. But I have found like, I could tell that some people, like when you're in the process of them just like talking to each other, trying to figure things out, and people are explaining the ways in which they, let's say like they're telling you, or they're telling each other, okay, you're going to this key to this key, and then to this key to that key, da 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 da, whatever. And like using words like staccato and all these different, like some words that like not everybody knows.
Secondary dominance.
Yeah, using like big words. I'm not saying staccato is like a big word or anything, but some people don't know what
like
staccato
technical
means.
Jargon.
Yeah, and like not some of the musicians being like, "What are you talking about?" Like, yeah. And I think that's where some of the disconnect can be, because the thing is, it's like those musicians that are like, "Oh, I know all of these words and I'm trying to explain it to you, but you're not understanding." They feel like they are more. They carry themselves as if they are almost like better than the other musicians because of that. And I hate seeing it, but I mean, I see it all the time. And the culture here in New Orleans, at least, like they're,
and you bring it like something you bring up like a specific thing, or it's like something I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's just like the language thing, where it's like, and it is kind of, there's something kind of cool about the fact that it like, comes in a lot of different languages, and we've got these, like it's kind of neat that we have these like Italian directions in music and whatnot. Like, but it does make it sometimes more difficult to learn. Like it says ritardando instead of slow down, and like, okay, maybe if you're playing in the symphony or something, then yeah, obviously you're going to be used to that by then. But like, if you're starting out kids, like why not just say slow? Like why are we still marking it like that? And maybe we could put some of that off a little bit instead of trying to teach them how to speak Italian like up front, and like that, even kind of gets into a bigger point, like I've been getting into. It's just like, why do we keep on calling these like works by other composers by the like not in the vernacular language? Like we call Debussy's like big work La Mer instead of just the sea. Why? Like just for the clout of it? Yeah, just for the clout of it, basically.
And the fact that we're like going in with our pencils and marking what it actually is at this time point in time is just like, why don't we just update the music to our time?
Yes. There are things worth preserving in that for sure. And like again, I think if you're getting to that college level or even at that high school level, yeah, okay, fine, learn some of the technical terms for this, but it needs to be, you need to be able to like explain it in a way that isn't getting caught up so much on like, oh, staccato, tenuto, here are the technical terms for this. And it's just like the important thing is, do they understand like what it means to play with separation in the note? Do they understand what it means to play with a heaviness to the note? Do they understand? Like, that's more important. And if you talk to those, musicians that are really good musicians but can't read music, like they know music theory, but they might not, they might know it more like in their minds and in their kind of like fingers than they know it like in their kind of a conceptual framework. And both of those are worthwhile things. And they probably know a lot of things that, the classically trained pianist doesn't know. But it's just it's just different kinds of knowledge there. There's not to say that one is better than the other. I think that both complement each other really, really well. And you see that out of jazz musicians, especially because they get really good at, I mean, seriously, you talk to jazz musicians, they understand scales and modes and harmony better than most classical musicians. It's kind of incredible because those things complement each other. It's like when you have developed good musical instincts and good musicianship, and then start to fit that into a framework that just helps you understand more. That's incredible and inspiring and wonderful. But if it's just about, learn what the word, staccato means and, learn all of these terms that we're still using because Italy was really important in, Writ music history in the 1700s. Who cares? Like, that's not going to be relevant to people. And that's not really why we should be here in the first place. That's not the point of music theory. The point is not to sound like more than the next guy. The point is to figure out what makes this music tick and how do I make it more effectively?
Exactly. I love it. I wanted to quickly talk about something that was mentioned in Adam Neely's video, which I found very interesting. This is kind of going back to the whole dance thing that we were talking about a little bit. I wanted to know, because something that he had mentioned was that, or maybe he was just joking about this, but maybe he's right. Because I was like, maybe he is right. But are we better, like, more well-rounded musicians if we have good rhythm or can dance? Do you find? Like, I feel personally, I mean, I'm not the best of musicians when it comes to playing, but like singing and like having an understanding of like the ways in which my body moves to like certain beats and music, like that helps me so much when I'm like trying to like lay something down or like, put in the Logic Pro and make it a song, or I do find that there's a correlation with having good rhythm and being a great musician. And we find that, especially with musicians from different parts of the world.
Yeah.
I find like if you go like that, I think they said somewhere like in like Africa, like if you were to go to like musicians there and the ways in which they learn music, like you may not graduate if you can't dance or something, like they take that into more consideration than here.
Yeah, so that I remember that part of the video talking about, if you structured like the whole conservatory music theory thing around African music, then being able to dance would be like this fundamental part of the curriculum, and you wouldn't be able to graduate if you couldn't dance, which is kind of to draw this kind of ridiculous, to try to draw a almost satire of the way in which, if you can't do Schenkerian analysis or whatever, then you don't graduate from the conservatory. It helps you understand one particular type of music, but not necessarily all types. And to answer your question specifically, I think it depends. I think that no matter what, being able to dance would help you. I mean, it's going to be something that I think rounds out your musicianship in a way. How critical that is, I think would depend on like the kind of music that you're making, where it's like, if you're making obviously if you're making African or even just kind of like black music, like, or music that has kind of come out of African American culture and the diaspora, like, yeah, dance is going to play heavily into it. It might actually be kind of a critical thing for you to be able to have. Like, you can't, I mean, you just can't play in a funk band if you can't like fit in the pocket and get in the groove.
Yes.
Like, that's critical. Yes. It's not as critical to Writ music. Not, I mean, it would help, but you could probably get by without it. I would imagine. I think it depends on what kind of music are you making, because dance, like any other thing, is just a compositional parameter, or just kind of a particular kind of musical experience and a particular kind of musical skill, and how important that is going to be is going to depend on what genre you're getting into. I mean, honestly, it's probably not as important for smooth jazz as it is for, like, bebop. Okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Right. You're right. So I say, like, in all this, for the listeners, what we're basically trying to say is that music theory is not universal, because it is cultural specific to wherever you are, obtaining or learning what music is to you and the people that you are in proximity with, basically.
Yeah.
So it's a way of describing certain music, but not all styles of music. So with that, I want to go into our next segment, which is something that I've switched for the podcast. Is called Uncomfortable Questions Only. This was originally what used to be called J.Mix Explains It All, where I would basically give advice to people that ask for advice, and I give advice. So this is more along the lines of a segment where we discuss and address difficult questions that may trigger uncomfortable emotions, because that's something I'm really trying to hone into for this podcast now. The intent of this segment is to address why our emotions control our ability to present logical answers. I want to put that out there. I wouldn't be presenting this segment if I didn't already know it was a key factor in asserting my self-awareness, at least my self-awareness that I see it right now, because it can change. Self-awareness is evolving, always evolving, just like music. I personally believe that if two or more people can have a logical conversation about controversial matters without their emotions getting in the way, our realities would be so much kinder to us. So for this, and this is going to be something I'm doing with all of my guests, and I believe Calloway, you're the first person that I'm going to be doing this with, so just so you're aware, it's not going to be that.
This is fine.
Yeah, don't be nervous. So the ground rules for this is, number one, I'm going to put this is going to be on all the episodes. Mm-hmm. Ground rules. Number one, once the question is asked, we will address our emotions on air before continuing our reply. So before we even do anything else, we're going to address our emotions. The second rule is, if you decide to veto the question and not answer it, we will address on air why you can't answer it. The third rule, and I think this is the final rule. Nope, there's 4 rules. The third rule,
no rules.
If at any time our emotions get in the way of us continuing the discussion, we will pause the conversation. We will play a quick round of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and continue. And the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is basically like Coping Techniques for Anxiety by Ellen Hendrickson. If you aren't aware of it, it's like 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear.
I've seen that in passing. That's the first time I'm like seeing it written out. That's really cool.
Yeah. So we're going to do that if we need to. And if that doesn't work, number 4, we will cease the conversation and address it at another time, preferably on IG Live or some other platform. But yeah, if any of you have any uncomfortable questions that you would like me or my guests to unpack on the show, email me at theselfawaremillennial@gmail.com. So the uncomfortable question is, at least on my end.
I want to point out just before we start, I don't know what this question is going to be. That's like a lot of this I at least have an outline for, the topics we're going to talk about, but this is going to be a surprise. So yeah, I am not nervous. It's fine.
It's okay, because you actually kind of gave an answer earlier to this question, which I just want to revisit it. It's not that bad. Like this, you got off easy, okay, Calloway? The uncomfortable question that I wanted to know is, what style of music makes you the most uncomfortable? Like the most uncomfortable. Like when you listen to it, it like gives you like some form of discomfort. For me, it's country. But that's because with country, I associated with like hick and folks that live in like I hear racism.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Do you hear that in specifically modern country? Like, do you hear that so much in, Dolly Parton and some of the older, or like Arlo Guthrie, or like old country? Or do you hear it in, just Keith Urban?
I don't even know. I just know sometimes country just makes me not all of it. I don't know, because I know who Dolly Parton is, and I know like how Dolly Parton has like been for the for the cause, like from jump for the most part. Like I don't associate any of her music as that.
Yeah. No, and I'm kind of right there with you. I am right there with you a little bit with country, in that like I hear a lot of just a glorification of like a very particular kind of like white American culture that is it's subtly xenophobic. I mean, like it's subtly kind of just a celebration of a very, very like specific kind of just white America that I hate. Like it's kind of that. It's kind of that idea, like when people talk about like, real America, it's like, it's that kind of thing. And yes. Like, yeah, I remember actually I took a road trip. I think when I was moving here, actually, I was going through just the radio stations on the U-Haul and ended up listening to a lot of country music, trying to hone in on like why I didn't like it. And it was kind of an interesting experience, really. But, I think that I'm going to take this a slightly different direction, because uncomfortable like that I just don't like, like I'm going to go with uncomfortable. There's some 20th century music, especially kind of Writ music, that makes me profoundly uncomfortable. And it's good art because of that, but my God, does it make me uncomfortable. Like Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima is a really uncomfortable one. It's horrifying to listen to. And it also asks a lot of questions about like, this was a Polish composer and decided to dedicate this to the victims of Hiroshima. And like, should you do that? Like, is that a little bit cultural appropriation? Like, is it like, was it sincere? Was it like a marketing move? I think it was sincere, but that's still, by the discourse of today, I'm not sure how to feel about it. Yeah. And there's one in particular, actually, the 8 Songs for a Mad King was by Peter Maxwell Davies and sung by Julius Eastman, who is an amazing Black composer in his own right. And really, really underappreciated. I didn't learn about him until like a year or two ago, but that was a piece of music that actually made me like angry. Like I was mad that it existed. And that was like, it just felt so painful to listen to. And it felt like it was for pain's sake. It was these text settings of the Mad King, of whichever King George like went crazy. And it was texts from him sung in some of the most like disturbing and like physically painful ways that you can imagine. Like we talked about unhealthy. This was unhealthy singing, or, was at the very least designed to sound like it, to sound like, really painful vocal techniques. And it was extremely immediately affecting to me. But it just got to a point where I was like, I don't think this should exist. Like, I feel like this is just, what point is there to just kind of exploring the like profound pain of somebody having gone insane, if it's not to offer solace at some point? Like, this is just, at least Victims of Hiroshima was, about like a thing, like about a historical event that happened. It could be about like a social thing. This didn't feel like some appeal to like, let's talk about mental health. This just felt like, let's sit in this space that is just awful and disturbing and painful. And I was just like, why did you make this?
That sounds interesting, because how you're describing this kind of reminds me, for some reason, it reminds me of when Nina Simone came out with Strange Fruit, and white America was like, no, you are not doing this. we know you want to perform this, but you are not performing this at any of our and we're going to make sure that this song never becomes a hit. Right. And it made people was like, why would you create a song about this? Why are you making us sit in our transgressions, what we've done to you? Like it's almost that same thing, because like there's nothing about that song that that is happy, that is, it's all obviously like the way she's singing obviously is not like, it doesn't hurt, like, it's very soothed, it's very smooth, very subtle, very I don't know, velvety, I guess, but the lyrics,
yeah, it's uncomfortable, and there's, I think for me, and I don't want to, like, I think honestly, like, the thing is, 8 Songs for Mad King, like, is clearly a really good piece of art if it had that kind of impact on me, and I don't think that but it's just, I think that discomfort has to serve a purpose for me, and I didn't feel like it was, I didn't feel like the juice was worth the squeeze in that particular setting. And it's like,
gotcha.
But for Nina Simone or something, like, that makes a lot of sense. But I don't, and like, even there though, you kind of get into that tragedy porn thing where it's just like, at what point is this depiction of Black suffering like past the point of what is necessary to make a statement about Black suffering? At what point is it just kind of self-indulgent pain?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I know that there's a point past which I am not having fun with this piece of music and would rather be in a different room. And maybe that's a reflection on me. I don't know, but it's that stuff might be good art, but it's not art that I can really enjoy.
Okay. And that's completely valid. I think for myself, I find music, like, not all music, at least for me, that's why I appreciate so many different forms of art and music. Even if it's something I don't necessarily agree with or like, I'm just like, this is still music. This should still be considered just as important as something that makes me feel good when I listen to it.
Yeah.
And just like honoring that it is still part of the same bubble, I guess.
I really try to avoid ever saying like, this isn't music. I think that that's a really just bad statement to make more generally. It's like, it's one thing to say, I don't find this to be music, but like, generally speaking, that isn't even a helpful thing to say. And it's so, and more often than not, what you see that applied to is a way of trying to discredit a particular genre of music or art. Tends to be Black art, as unsurprisingly. It's like,
or associated, adjacent to,
right. I mean, like, there's the classic kind of Ben Shapiro thing. It's just like, oh, rap doesn't have melody or harmony, so it's like not really music. And it's like, dude, what are you on it? Like, it does different things. Like, if somebody calls it music, then it's music. It's just, do you find value in that? Like, when people say, is it music or is it art or those things, it's a cop-out. It's a weird misdirect from a real conversation that we should have that is more honest, which is just like, do you find value in this? Do you think that it's like, the real question is, do you think it's good? Like, yeah, it's okay if you don't, but don't try to hide behind, oh, it doesn't use harmony. Like, yes, okay. I mean, neither does Steve Reich. Like, who cares? Right. Yeah.
Right. And I'll just say this, and we'll get into like just wrapping it up. But I think even now I'm thinking about like, even when certain people, we at least today, I'm a Black woman, and a lot of people expect Black women in general to sound like Beyonce or Jennifer Hudson or something. Like, they expect that out of us, when that's not necessarily like our style of singing. That is not my style of singing, and I will fight to the death until if somebody makes me belt again if I don't feel like it. But I find that there's thankfully other Black women artists out there that we do have that don't necessarily like that have just as good music, that don't subscribe to all the riffing, the hoopling, the hollering of what they think that, Black women or, like just like our version of like how we're supposed to be singing is. And I don't know, for some reason, I always go back to Sade and that band and like how they implement their music. not once did Sade riff. She just sings the song so like smoothly, and just like all the notes are just there. They may dip a little bit, but like it overall, it's not like all over the place, and just like
Right.
you know, like she very much complements like the rest of the band, which is wonderful. And I think that's why I really enjoy listening to Sade.
I wanted to make a point to that. Maybe you saw this going around, but there was somebody saying like, you know, it's a little bit hypocritical that a lot of people will be very critical of particularly like Black women or Black performers doing lots of, you know, runs and riffs and stuff in their vocal stuff. And then they'll turn around and just like not think anything about a 17-note melisma on Alleluia. You know, like a soprano aria that goes absolutely nuts on one vowel. That's fine, you know, whatever. But, you know, you get a Black woman doing it in a Black art form, and suddenly it's like, oh man, wouldn't they just like, you know, can't they simplify it down? It's like
it's literally just a different way. It's yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely correct on that. I don't know if I've seen it, but make sure you send me the link, and I would love to look at it just to make sure. But you're right. I know, you know what? It was probably like one of those like memes, right?
Yeah, no, it was just a little thread that talking about like that. It's a very double two-sided. It's a double standard about it.
Yeah. I think there was also another funny one where it was like how many syllables are in Alleluia or
17, right?
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. It was great. All right. Well, this was such a great conversation. Give them your socials, Calloway, so that they can follow you on all the social media networks, because you are on several of them, and
yes,
as you should be.
Absolutely. So you can follow me on my Facebook page. You can follow me at my Instagram, and you can follow me on my TikTok, which is kind of new, and I'm exploring that, and that's fun. I have a website you can check out too. I occasionally post some blog stuff. And then every once in a while I'm up on YouTube, but mostly just like kind of when I have something that's too big for Instagram. But I would love to see you guys on there. I'm posting some music content that's hopefully trying to bridge the gap between the music that we all kind of grow up loving and listening to, and this other music that a lot of nerds spend, you know, thousands of hours trying to get good at.
Awesome. And I will leave Calloway's information in the show notes for y'all, so you can follow him on all of the socials. You are so very welcome. If you want to support J.Mix, the podcaster and the artist, there are two things you can do. One, you can make an Instagram reel or TikTok with my music featured. There are now 3 singles out, as you know: Crescent Groove, Let's Go, and NRE. If you put them up there, make sure you tag me so I can see it and shout you out on my socials. And the second thing you can do is you can subscribe to my Patreon, where I post a lot of bonus content pertaining to the podcast and the music projects I'm working on. Right now, I just posted a new episode on an analysis, a detailed analysis of my 2 latest singles. And I go into like the lyrics and like why I put lyrics in that certain area and all that. And I kind of give a background story on like why these songs were created. It's great. So you can go to www.patreon.com/thesoftwaremillennial for that. And yeah, thank you so much, Calloway. This was such a wonderful conversation, and hopefully we'll have you back on here. I know we're going to get a lot of different comments about this particular subject matter that we were talking about. And I want to also thank all of the Instagram folks that were giving me their information about like songs and genres that they were uncomfortable with, because like it was just so nice to like hear different versions of like why people didn't like certain music. It was very interesting, but I found a commonality, and it was just that sometimes it just made them, there was an emotional attachment to why they didn't like those certain genres. It wasn't necessarily like how they heard it. It was how it was making them feel. So
a real quick thing on that. So Adam really actually did something about that, talking about what's with the music that we hate, and what he kind of posited, and I think he was quoting somebody else, but he talked about how a lot of it's actually really close to the music that we really enjoy. A lot of the times that's why we hate a particular genre, is because it feels like a bastardization. Like maybe you hate country music because you love folk music, or you hate Christian rock because you like rock. You really like rock, and it feels, you know, like So that's another kind of interesting framework to look at it through.
Yes. Well, yes. Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out too. I'm gonna put if I find another video, I'm gonna put that in the show notes too. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Self-Aware Millennial. I will see y'all next week. Bye.